This week in the Boardroom, brought to you by NYSE Governance Services Corporate Board Member, along with Governance Knowledge Partners, the Center for Audit Quality, and Grant Thornton, and contributing partners, National Investor Relations Institute, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. I'm TK Kerstetter, the chairman of the NYSE Governance Services Corporate Board Member, and we have a very interesting show. And as you can see by the background, we are at the annual Boardroom Summit in New York City. We have some 400 plus directors joining us for the conference, and we like to do remote shows from the conference, and we have a great one today. We're going to talk about being a versatile and valuable committee member, and joining me as my guest today is Phoebe Wood, who is the director of Coca-Cola Enterprise, Invesco Limited, Leggett and Platt, and the Pioneer Natural Resources Company. So welcome, Phoebe.
Well, thank you, TK. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I think it might be best for our audience if we first sort of give a real fast rundown of those companies, just so everybody knows, and it's interesting how diverse each of them are.
Well, great, thank you. Coca-Cola Enterprises is the bottler for Europe. So it is a franchise, so to speak, of the Coca-Cola system. Leggett and Platt is a Midwestern manufacturer. It's a wire bender, I call them affectionately, and is a steel company and is a creator of box springs and mattresses, lumbar support. It's the heartland of America in manufacturing. I'm also on the board of Invesco Limited, and Invesco is a professional services firm that's an asset manager, manages over $700 billion in assets, and it touches global investment, so with great strengths. And the last board is Pioneer Natural Resources, which is an independent oil and gas company, which is US focused and is using new technology to develop shale oil and has a great presence in Texas.
Well, Phoebe, one of the reasons that I wanted to have you as a guest is you serve on those 4 diverse boards and you serve on multiple committees, meaning that you're on 2 or 3 audit committees, you're on 2 and 3 comp committees, you're on 2 or 3 nom-gov committees, okay? So it really gives you a broad perspective of that, and I'm sure in each company, in each case, it's different. That's one of the things that we want to sort of get to here. So when you're serving on these different committees, and tell me how they're similar or different from one company to another, and then by that, do you take on different roles with your experience depending on what other skill sets are on those committees?
Right. So great question, thank you. I think there are some similarities because some of the functions are very much the same. If you're on the audit committee, there are certain things that one must do, and the review of all of the SEC reporting and internal audits. And so there are things that feel very much the same regardless of what that industry is, because they cut across all industries in terms of what their functions are. So that feels very much the same. Second thing that feels the same is when you have new regulations coming in. So whether or not it's wrestling with say-on-pay, or whether or not it's Dodd-Frank, or whether or not it was Sarbanes-Oxley early on, you're wrestling with those same things. And whenever there's something new like that coming through, the issues feel the same, maybe expressed quite differently in each of those companies, but the issues are the same. The differences are clearly the stage of the company, the issues that the company faces. The chairmanship of each committee actually matters a great deal in terms of where they're going to put the emphasis, how we're going to spend our time, et cetera. And I think one other thing that I have noticed is the quality of the staff work that precedes the committee meeting. And so you'll get a variety of different expressions of that in each one of those companies. And so I think between the composition of the committee, the chair, and the staff work, do I play a different role in each one? Certainly. In some cases, I'm a very new board member and learning. In other cases, if you have specific deep knowledge of an industry, then you can have a different role just because you have decades of experience. And so I think it is many things that factors into that.
So the fact that you've been serving on board committees since 2002, so you have a good number of years of experience, and again, as we said, multiple committees. Tell me how you've seen each evolve. Tell me how you've seen audit, comp, and nom-gov evolve over those years.
Right, so starting with audit, Sarbanes-Oxley came in, and so that was a whole, we've now integrated that so fully into our world, we don't think about how significant I think that was. Audit committees have, I think their purview has increased as we have added risks. Sometimes risks it's added and integrated into audit committees, sometimes it does not. But I think as a result there's a little bit bigger scope perhaps in audit committees than there necessarily was before. And as we continue to think about compliance and risks, audit committees at least have an oversight, if not direct feeling of responsibility, I think, for looking at that. If I go to the comp committee, well, that's really been a big change. Some of that brought on, I think, by shareholder activisms collectively. Some of it brought on by legislation. And I think a deep sense of we really need to look at this and understand it well, and we maybe better get some professional help in there. So I think there's been a profound change in terms of many more professionals helping you in a way that audit always had external auditors to help you. The comp committee now has compensation consultants. Excuse me, the compensation committee now has compensation experts that can really be called on to help them. So I think, I don't want to say it's a professionalization to make up a word, but there certainly is a third party access to expertise that's a big change since 2002. Finally, Nom and Gov. It can tackle all the tough issues, whether it's CEO succession or whether it's board composition or board performance. And so it can be very powerful. It's one of the, I think it takes on some of the toughest issues that a company has. And when it works well, it works really well.
I would say that probably the Nom-Gov has evolved the most only because it seems to be the fastest growing committee as far as issues being placed in front of it. You know, whether it's splitting the roles at the top, whether it's board evaluations, whether it's, you know, CEO succession. It just seems like there's a lot going on in the Nom-Gov committee.
That's right, and I think that the other thing is Nom-Gov has to integrate its role with the rest of the board too, because the whole board feels responsibility, for example, for CEO succession, not just a few people on Nom-Gov. And yet there's a lot of work in Nom-Gov, whether you figure out how is it that we're going to govern ourselves, how is it that we really want to take a look at each other and evaluate how well we're doing. So and it tackles the hardest sometimes issues because it's us that we're looking at.
So if you're the so-called expert that I've accused you of being, okay, what would you say, what are like the key attributes that would be characteristic of the best committees that you've served on? So what key attributes make a committee very effective?
I think the first thing I'd look to is the chairman. If you have a high-functioning committee, it's generally because you have a leader who's focused on the right issues, has the right preparation, and helps you as a committee member being prepared for that. So whether or not you're dealing with a tough issue on audit or comp or Nom and Gov, I think the most important committees and the most effective committees I've been on have been very well led in that regard. Second thing is, it's the staff preparation. You know, I think there's a huge amount that staffs can do to get you much more comfortable in any one of those areas. And so I have been very impressed with the quality of the staff work in each of the boards as to bring us to that. And then at the end of the day, how well prepared are the committee members? Are we have we completely prepared? Are we ready to share openly, even if it's a tough issue for us to do? I think it's all of those.
So my last question for you is a fun question. When you come to the summit or an educational event like this, and you serve on all these committees, and in our case we offer peer exchanges or we'll offer workshops, how do you decide which committee workshop? Because you can only be in one place. So how do you decide what you're going to do relative to that?
Well, it's such a great question, and thanks for having this very good continuing education and peer-to-peer exchange that you have offered us here today. I frankly decide on the basis of what is the hottest topic or the thing I know the least about in each of my areas of responsibility. So I've been attracted, for example, this time to cybersecurity, because it just happens to be very important. If you talk with the senior political leaders in our country, they worry most about cybersecurity just at a national security level. And if you think about each of the companies in which I serve, confidentiality and protecting that consumer data, protecting intellectual property is critical. And so how we're thinking about it and what we're doing about it and how to address it as a director is front and center. So that's what I've done this time. But another time it might have been, please, let me learn what's the newest things in Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So I think a lot of times it's when we have the obligation to become very knowledgeable at the appropriate director level about what's going on, so how to think about it. That's what attracts me to it.
Well, I salute you. Not enough directors are actually taking the time out of their busy schedules to come and get educated in areas that they need to. We see a amazingly small percentage of people that are going to do that. So I salute you for that, and I thank you for being our guest on the show today.
Well, TK, it's been a pleasure. I'm very grateful. Thank you so much for having me, and keep up the good work with what you're doing.
And that will conclude this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. We hope you enjoyed the show. Join us next week when we'll look at another critical issue that will help you be a better board member or committee member. We'll see you then.
Join us again next week for This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by NYSE Governance Services, Corporate Board Member, along with Governance Knowledge Partners, the Center for Audit Quality, and Grant Thornton, and contributing partners, National Investor Relations Institute, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.